Good morning and afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the National Housing Resource Center's Leaders in Housing Counseling webinar. Today is Thursday, December 1st, 2022. My name is Ebony and I will be navigating the webinar today. There are a few things that we'd like to go over before we get started with this webinar. First, we'd like to know where you guys are watching from. If you can, please put in the chat box what city and state you're watching from and the organization that you are affiliated with. Just know that this webinar is being recorded. If there's any portion of this webinar that you have missed, you will be able to go to our website at www.hsgcenter.org, and there you will see all of our Leaders in Housing Counseling webinars. A copy of the PowerPoint presentation will be sent out and added to the chat box. So if you'd like to follow along with our PowerPoint presentation, you can do so by clicking the link that is in the chat box. Closed captioning has also been enabled for this webinar. If you need to use this feature, just click the CC button down at the bottom of your screen and the closed captioning will show up at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions for any of our presenters today, you can put your questions in the Q&A box and not the chat box. If you put your questions in the chat box, it's constantly rolling, so we may miss it. We don't want to miss any of your questions. So please, if you have any questions, please add it to the Q&A box and not the chat box. We invite you all to follow us on our social media channels. On most channels, we are at NHRC 846, and on our YouTube channel, where you can also find our Leaders in Housing Counseling webinars, you can find us at National Housing Resource Center. I am going to, membership. If you guys are interested in joining NHRC, and we have a couple of benefits for joining NHRC, which is a discount on the CoreLogic credit reports. And we also have a discount on the Savvy Online Student Loan Service tool that you can use. If you are interested in joining NHRC or renewing your membership with us, you can also go to our website at www.hsgcenter.org. That information is being placed in the chat box for your convenience. So I'm also going to turn this part of the webinar over to Bruce Dorpalen. He'll go over our agenda and other items. Thanks for joining us and enjoy our webinar.
Well, can you believe here we are? It's December. I have to say it's probably the fourth or fifth time I've said that today, but things are moving quickly. So here's what the plan is for today. We're going to get a short intro teaser from Willie Heineke from who's a National Service Program Manager at Housing Action Illinois. They have a really exciting announcement that might really have some value for a number of your organizations. I'm going to save the surprises for him, but it's part of this whole career path stuff we've been working on. So please, you'll be very interested in what he has to say. I'm going to do just one kind of NHRC update, and it's really around credit report pricing. I think either Ebony or I sent out an email about FICO pricing just before the call, and a number of you have written to me about things you're hearing and seeing. Appreciate all that. So we're going to do a couple polls, 3 polls about information. I'll talk a little bit about some things we probably should be considering as an industry, as a field, about ways we might be able to manage credit reporting costs and still do our work in a high quality way. So it's the start of a conversation. It's not the big end, and there'll be some leaders in housing counseling calls around credit issues, as it's an area, as you know, we've been drilling down in, and there's plenty more that the team's been working on. Really, the call is going to be about the big challenge we're seeing, which is these private equity companies coming in purchasing what are essentially starter homes that would normally be first-time home buyer homes and flipping them to be rentals, raising the rents. They turn out not to be very good landlords. There's quite a bit to all of this. We've had some deeper dives on that. The reason we're having Gene Slater on and Chris Siglin is that they are people who are deeply involved with these issues. Chris is with the National Community Stabilization Trust, and we've had Julia Gordon in the past and others from NCST. They're really concerned about the availability of property and how it's managed and have been concerned about this issue for a long time. They had deep participation in our cash buyers brief that we did a year and a half ago. Gene Slater is actually in the investment industry and has been in discussions with people in the Senate about a tax policy and legislation that could essentially curb some of the private equity activity. It's a long way from becoming law, but the idea is that it's pretty innovative and may be part of a much deeper conversation. So we wanted to get him in early, and hopefully this will be stuff that we'll have a chance to have a more conversation in 2023 about. There'll be plenty of room for questions, and you'll see Gene is a very kind of candid guy about things, so it's definitely worth asking him. He does have deep knowledge about the markets and investment and how private equity works, and Chris obviously has deep knowledge about the industry, how it impacts on us. So please use all of that as an opportunity. And then, of course, we'll do another plug on joining NHRC. We're loving the fact that so many groups are renewing at the end of the year. If your organization hasn't joined, really support the struggle here. We are deeply involved. This will be we're looking forward to 2023 as being a very innovative year. So there's a lot to talk about. But at this point, let's jump over to Willie and share with us what I think is pretty exciting stuff.
Thanks for that, Bruce. Good morning, afternoon, everyone. My name is Willie Heineke. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the National Service Program Manager at Housing Action Illinois, calling in from Mount Vernon, Illinois, down in central and southern Illinois at the moment. I am extremely pleased to be joining the National Housing Resource Center's Leaders Call today. Some of you may remember my face and the sound of my voice from a conversation we had this time last year. I proposed and piloted a AmeriCorps Vista program that Housing Action and I dreamed up that we called the Housing Counseling Corps. Just as a brief reminder, the Housing Counseling Corps idea is we've been placing AmeriCorps Vista positions at organizations, and they build the capacity of various types of housing programming. In this Housing Counseling Corps, they would build the capacity of your housing counseling work. They would pilot, launch, enhance, grow the scale of, do research for any and all of your needs. All the while, in their term of service, they would participate in online study groups coordinated and facilitated by Housing Action Illinois, specifically Wanda Collins, who I see is on the call today. Hey, Wanda. And they would learn how to and then pass the exam during their term of service. When they completed their term of service, and they've been spending a year working with y'all, building the capacity, shadowing your current housing counselor so they can understand the ins and the outs of your communities and the needs of your organization and where you're headed, you could offer them a full-time staff position. And then you would have a HUD certified housing counselor at your organization. You'd spend obviously a year of your time supervising and supporting the person, but that's the overview that I just want to remind everybody with. Last year, the update I have from last year is this past fall, Housing Action Illinois Board of Directors approved my proposal to nationalize our AmeriCorps Vista program through the Housing Counseling Corps. So in 2023, I will be accepting applications from organizations outside of Illinois nationwide to accept to host AmeriCorps Vista programs through our Housing Counseling Corps programming. The limit doesn't exist on how many positions you can apply for, how many organizations can apply for. I've built a strong relationship with the federal agency, and they believe in our expertise, both through our AmeriCorps program and through David Young and Wanda Collins's expertise. And they know that this work can get done. So that's why next week on December 8th, we'll be hosting another webinar where I will spend about an hour, maybe an hour and a half with Q&A, walking you through the application that will be readily available for you all to complete and send back to me on January 27th so that we can work together and recruit these positions to really solve a lot of your issues. Yeah, I know I think I've about taken up the time I should take on this. I do want to take a moment and say that y'all have been on my mind for the last year. I was taken aback that I wasn't able to start offering the positions right away. And the call we had with you all last year gave me the motivation and the knowledge of how much you all could use this program to put together an excellent offer and proposal. And I believe Ellie just shared the registration link for that webinar. I implore you to at least join the webinar to hear us out, because we've got a really exciting thing for you all. And I'm really just beyond excited to bring this to you all. So that's all the time I'll take. Thanks, everyone.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So this is pretty exciting. So just to make sure that nobody missed the punchline here, national, they have AmeriCorps program. These are subsidized internships, and they're making them available nationally to housing counseling, to HUD-approved housing counseling agencies on an application basis. And you can get full details next Thursday on the Leaders Call. And Willie will be there and others. They've got an excellent training program that will complement this. And part of the goal is to get as many of those people to become certified counselors as possible. So this is a double win, and very exciting, and big shout out to Housing Action Illinois and their team for really being creative thinking about how to help address some of our housing employment issues, workforce issues in the coming future. So very good news. Thank you for all that good work, Willie, Wanda, David, and others. I'm going to talk briefly about the credit issues. And we've done a lot about credit and the quality of credit and how to improve people's credit standing. We've got more that's coming up in January. But this is actually kind of an emerging issue that I've been hearing a lot about just this week, and probably some of you are hearing about it as well, which is there's a price increase on credit. The news lately has been on the FICO score price increase. So that's not the credit report itself, but we are hearing also that there is a likelihood of a jump in credit report prices as well. And part of what I've been trying to get my hands around is and to be honest, you know, as you know, we have if you're a member of NHRC, you can get a discount from the largest credit report provider, CoreLogic. And it's pretty substantial, so that's very valuable, but that's gone up every year as well. And it won't be sheltered from the FICO increase or anything like that as well. So part of what I've been trying to think about and could use your help on is whether we really need to pull 3 credit reports. And or should we think about what's the right number, that we actually get a good representation. That is there that much difference between the credit bureaus? When I started in this business, and we're talking, when I started housing counseling world was in the mid 80s, there was regional differences. So TransUnion was much more the Northeast, Equifax was much more the Southeast, and those kind of differences mattered because they had business relations. Now it's all been pretty nationalized, probably internationalized some. So I'm not sure that that's so important anymore. I'm not sure they're that distinctive. And I do know some lenders don't pull 3 credit reports. They're only pulling 2 credit reports. I know some counseling agencies are only pulling 1 credit report. And I think we're probably not getting away from the world where we want to not pull a credit score, even though credit scores are frustrating. They're a reality of our business. But maybe you pull 1 bureau and 3 credit scores. I don't know. I mean, I think we should figure out what the ideal situation is. So we've got a poll that's already live, and thank you for being ahead of the game here. So the first question that I'm interested in is, do you pull 1, 2, or 3 credit reports? And if you are a deep advocate of pulling 1 or 2, put that in the chat and what your agency is, so we can follow up. And we may want to put together kind of a discussion, a roundtable around this question. If you're a strong advocate of all 3, maybe you should put that in too. And we should get all sides of this conversation. So I mean, that's one issue out there so it looks like it's a very strong split between 1 and 3, and one looks like just 3 agencies are doing just 2, but 19 are 3, and credit reports, and 18 are 1. So that's very helpful. So why don't we end this poll and go to round number 2? And so there's the breakdown, a very even split between 1 and 3. Very, very interesting. And then let's see. So there we go. All right. So the second one, okay, so this is what we just asked. Okay, good. There we go. There's the second one. Does your agency charge clients for the pre-purchase credit reports? So, so I understand in foreclosure it's different, but we're just really asking about pre-purchase. About whether you carry the cost or whether you charge clients. And well, that's very interesting. So it's heavily coming that you're carrying the cost, which is no small amount of money. So that's pretty interesting. I think we've got a very good picture on this. Why don't we go to to survey number 3? And then, so this is the other question, is which credit bureaus do you pull? And you can do more than 1 on these. So we understand if you're pulling all 3, pull all of them. If you're doing another credit company besides the 4 that are listed, we put Vantage in there. And I would love to hear kind of if that has worked well. It's not what the industry uses. The industry use Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Vantage is used more typically in other forms of credit, but it hasn't been as widely adopted. There's Vantage is actually so it's and it does have some features that the others don't, so that's interesting as well. I mean, I'll just while we're collecting this data, I will point out to you that our experience is that Equifax is substantially more expensive than Experian and TransUnion on soft pulls. And Experian and TransUnion do not charge extra if it's a soft pull from a hard pull, but Equifax does. And it's been something that frustrated us for quite a while. We raised this with the CFPB. The CFPB said they're not allowed to deal with pricing, couldn't address the issue. We did run this up the flag in House Financial Services Committee a few years ago, but we're never able to really get enough traction to do something about it. Not sure if that's within their scope or possibilities anyways. So, I mean, it's worth thinking about all these things, and we'll probably take a deeper dive when we have a little better sense of what the 2023 pricing is. But, it's pretty evenly split here. And that's very interesting. So, if you've got some feedback you want to give us, please put it in the chat and I'll take a look at it after this call so that we can provide more information for people. And we're going to need to figure out if there's a useful conversation we can have that will help reduce costs and not make us so reliant on all three bureaus. So thank you. That's the entire presentation I wanted to do on credit reports. This is very helpful because it keeps our information relevant. If you've got some more thoughts after the call, please email me with them. I understand it's both a hot topic and it's an important one for us. So let's move on to the next presenter. And I hope it's Christie's coming up next to give us an idea of what's happening in House and Senate. We're kind of really getting down to the wire, lots of very kind of crucial issues here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christy Villalobos-Hauser. I'm the Housing Policy Director. So for FY 2023 appropriations, currently there is a continuing resolution that is in place until December 16th as members of Congress continue to work on the final spending numbers. So they will likely have a 1-week continuing resolution that would go up until December 23rd, just to give leaders some more time to negotiate and ultimately, from the House side, I'm hearing that they're laser focused on meeting the mid-December deadline and working on the top line spending numbers. Whereas on the Senate side, progress is a bit slower. Currently, with the Georgia runoff election on December 6th next week, that has taken some attention away from these discussions. So the Senate is a little more delayed on negotiations. So we may hear more on their side next week after Wednesday's election. So we are still meeting with offices and advocating for $70 million towards HUD's Housing Counseling Assistance Program. And we're asking staffers or legislative members to discuss this funding level with appropriators to ensure that there is more support for this funding level. So ideally, the budget would be passed this year, because next year the two chambers are divided. So House Republicans are likely to want to increase defense spending versus non-defense spending. Yeah, and then Congress is also working on considering the tax extenders bill, which would renew credits for programs that are set to expire, such as the low-income housing tax credit. So we are advocating to include the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act in any tax extenders bill, or even the omnibus bill, if that is a better legislative mechanism. So yeah, and there is strong support for the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act. Recently, I believe it was a few days ago, 100 congressional members signed on to a letter. It was a coalition, a letter that showed strong support for the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act. So this included bipartisan members. So we're hoping that there can be a final push there. And yeah, that's all happening in Capitol Hill, and I'll pass it on to the next speaker.
Thank you. And that's Eric.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric Moore, and I'm the Outreach Coordinator. As always, I'm here to remind you of our free job board. I encourage you all to post your open positions, because our job board is specifically catered to housing counseling, the housing counseling industry. If your organization has any open positions, post them to our job board. And you can also view resumes from qualified candidates across the country. Right now, we have about 36 resumes uploaded and a little bit over 60 positions posted. If you have any questions, please contact me. I could walk you through the process of posting your position, or I can post it for you. And if you're not the correct person to upload job postings, I'm asking you to refer this information to your HR recruiting team. And that's all I have. I'm going to pass it over to the next speaker.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And, really, if you're doing any recruiting, why aren't you putting them on the jobs board? It doesn't have to be the only thing you do, but boy, it's free. And as long as we're building up a volume here, we're going to get a lot more traffic. The traffic is actually moving a great deal more on the jobs board right now. So please build that into your routine for anybody that's doing hiring. And, housing counseling positions, but also other positions directly related to the housing counseling work, intake workers, et cetera, are all appropriate for this. Okay, so we're ready to dive into the bigger topic today. So we had a lot of talk about cash buyers and these private equity companies who come in and are really transforming the housing market, but not in a good way, and really become serious competition for the buyers that we're the most concerned about. And there's no way to address Black and brown home ownership and the home ownership gap if there's no housing stock available. And it doesn't matter how good your down payment assistance program is, if you can't buy a house to use it on, you're kind of out of luck. And so we're this is round 2 or 3 on this conversation for us. And I'm really pleased to have Chris Siglin here, who's a leading voice with NCST, the National Community Stabilization Trust. They are doing powerful, important work to address home ownership and housing opportunity, and especially around vacant houses and communities. And so they've been very, very helpful in all these conversations, and will continue being so. So Chris is going to kind of set the table for us on these issues and where she and her organization see this as going. So Chris, it's all yours.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. I have put together some graphs to show you the depressing and powerful market forces that are making it so hard for your clients to find homes. So first slide, please. This is from the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard, this is national figures showing that nearly a quarter of homes last year were purchased by investors. So next slide. And one of the interesting aspects of this problem is that a lot of private equity firms have specific strategies targeting the Sunbelt cities that have seen population growth and job growth. And so the figures are even higher. Look at 33% of homes in Georgia last year were bought by investors. So that's, think if there's any housing counseling agencies from Atlanta on this call, that's a really tough situation. So next slide. So the reason why they're doing it is because rents are soaring. So what happened was when house prices dipped so startlingly, as you can see in 2008 and 2009, Wall Street firms began buying up homes, and they discovered as they did it that it had tremendous returns because the price to buy the house was depressed, and then you could rent it out at a higher rate, and people expected them to sell the homes when the markets stabilized, and that didn't happen. They've just gotten big in the business. And the underlying cause, and this is what makes this such a tough policy issue, the underlying cause is the shortage of affordable homes. Next slide. You all are familiar with how few homes there are for sale. And next slide. The underlying cause of that is for over a decade, we've been underbuilding. The population growth has been, and household formation is higher than the number of units of housing. So that's what's keeping rents high. That's what keeps private equity in the market competing with owner occupants. And it's that stock of homes that's affordable to first-time home buyers those are the homes that are appealing to them to rent out. They're not renting out luxury homes. So next slide. So I think when you think about this, I mean, and this is a tough issue because we're a capitalist economy. The home buyers want to be able to sell their homes to the highest and best offer, but this is really reducing the opportunity for housing is most families' largest expense. So this is a really tremendous policy problem. I think there's probably 3 buckets of solutions. We're going to hear from our next speaker about proposals to eliminate the tax preferences that make this business model work for investors. I'm going to talk a little about the other way to address this in the short term is to make more of homes that have been foreclosed on available to owner occupants and nonprofits. And there's 3 basic ways that can be done: through REO disposition from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or FHA homes. Most homes that are in various stages of foreclosure at FHA are actually disposed through a process called CWCOT, which I'll explain. And then sometimes notes that are delinquent, mortgages that are delinquent, are sold off. All of those are potential homes that you could be buying, that your clients could be buying. And then, of course, over the long term, the solution is increasing the supply of affordable homes. And I will say that nonprofits and CDFIs are doing some really creative and interesting things to compete with cash buyers. And governmental entities as well. There was terrific testimony in front of Senate Banking Committee by the City of Cincinnati's Redevelopment Authority. They bought a portfolio of homes from an investor, and they're rehabbing them using bond financing. So since they're a governmental entity, they can issue bonds to finance this. There are also nonprofits doing this work. In Milwaukee, Axe Housing has been buying up houses to compete with cash investors, because the Milwaukee market is particularly troubled by the prevalence of investors because rents are high and home prices are low. And that's exactly what private investors want. Similarly, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, HomeWise, which is a nonprofit developer in CDFI, has been working with realtors in some neighborhoods to try to compete with cash buyers. So I'm going to talk about what NCST does. So next slide, please. So at NCST we were formed during the Great Recession, and what we do is we were formed to transfer foreclosed homes to community-based nonprofits who rehab them and sell them to owner occupants. So we've helped sell 28,000 homes to owner occupants or responsible rental. So one of the interesting changes in the market, housing market in the past decade, has been the prevalence of auction sites, which are a way, as you all know, it's a very difficult way for a regular family to buy a home. That auction sites require you to bid cash, and they don't allow financing. So that would be a difficult way for a family to buy a home. But NCST has recently formed a partnership with Xome, which is a subsidiary of Mr. Cooper. It's a big mortgage servicing company that they get servicers transfer properties that are in the process of foreclosure to Xome to be sold on the auction site. But before they go up on an auction site, we've got a 30-day first look that allows NCST's network of community-based buyers to have a crack at these houses. So this is a very, it's a great partnership, and it's a way to, again, make more of this valuable stock available to owner occupants. The other people who can bid on these homes are HUD-approved nonprofits and government entities. So we've got some suggestions into HUD to make this process work better, because it's only HUD-approved nonprofits that can buy the homes. And we have some suggestions for HUD about how to expand that list. But I think this is a very useful way to make homes available in a really tight market. Now, another thing that Christy referred to that I think ultimately is part of the longer term solution to this problem of lack of supply of homes affordable to first time home buyers is the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act, which you heard about. So next slide, please. This is the broadest coalition I have ever worked on. It is an innovative public policy that would create a tax credit that fills the valuation gap for single family homes. And the supporters include everyone from Habitat for Humanity to the Mortgage Bankers Association. So next slide. And the reason why there's such a broad and diverse coalition working on this is every state has homes that are in poor condition, and it costs more to rehab them than the house can be sold for. And as this housing stock in the US gets older, every year this problem is worse. And even with the run up in housing prices, there's still plenty of places where it costs more to fix up a home than the home can be sold for. And there are many families don't have the ability to work with the contractor to do the set of rehabs. So it's really important to get developers in there fixing up these houses. So there are things for your clients to buy. So next slide. So we've been working together since this whole Congress, and we have bipartisan co-sponsors, Senator Cardin of Maryland and Portman of Ohio. You know, Ohio and Maryland have lots of houses that suffer from the valuation gap. And as is Representative Brian Higgins, who represents Buffalo, New York. So all these members represent areas that have houses that suffer from the valuation gap. So we're now up to, as Christy said, we're up to 100 co-sponsors in the House, bipartisan. And similarly, we're up to 24 co-sponsors in the Senate. And we're really hoping to get this included if they add tax provisions to the budget bill that they'll probably pass on Christmas Eve. So next slide. So the way this would work is it's kind of based on the model of the low-income housing tax credit. So it's, but the low-income housing tax credit can only be used for financing apartments. This is for single-family homes. So next slide. It is like the low-income housing tax credit in that funds would be, each of the 50 states would get an allocation. It'd be about $2 billion a year, adjusted for inflation. And again, the state HFAs would administer this. So next slide. The plans, the states, similarly as they do with the low-income housing tax credit, the states would write allocation plans and decide which neighborhoods needed this. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, so and it's important to note about this is that the statute restricts this to neighborhoods that need the investment. So it's places characterized by higher poverty, lower family incomes, and lower housing prices. Because you wouldn't want to do this everywhere. The census tract eligibility is about 22% of the country nationwide and about 27% of rural areas. So next slide. This shows you the state of Pennsylvania, what is eligible, where in Pennsylvania is eligible for Neighborhood Homes Investment Act tax credits. So next slide. I think this is an interesting comparison. Nashville, Tennessee is a booming market where you wouldn't want to pour gas on the fire of gentrification there. So you can see how much of Nashville is eligible for this. So it's the lower income neighborhoods in Nashville. But next slide, please. look at how much of Baltimore, Maryland is eligible, because the value gap is a terrible problem in Baltimore. It costs more to fix the roof, to fix the heating, to bring a house up to code than the house can be sold for. And that's why so much of this, there's such a wide swath of Baltimore is eligible for this. That's why we're so happy to have Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland be one of our sponsors. So next slide. This is, we have a website called the neighborhoodhomesinvestmentact.org. If you want to see where in your area would be eligible for Neighborhood Homes Investment Act tax credits, you can go to this map and look it up. And then it's important to note that there will be a big area in the state eligible for this, and then the state housing finance agency makes decisions of awarding the credits to nonprofits or developers who then present plans for how they want to use them and where they want to target the resources. So next slide. But this is only 1 to 4 unit buildings, and it can be used for new construction for sale, substantial rehab, or one of the things that we did a lot of work on was making sure that this benefits longtime residents of the neighborhood. So there's a higher tax credit amount available for substantial rehab for existing homeowners, because they generally may not have the capacity to take on a bigger mortgage, but it still is good for them to be able to benefit from improvements to their neighborhood and protect their equity. So next slide. So there are restrictions on the incomes of the homeowners that can buy the homes, and on the maximum home prices, because again, no one wants this to be used to gentrify neighborhoods. So next slide. So the tax credit is capped at 35% of total development costs, or 80% of the median sales price for new homes. This is aimed for modest homes for low and moderate income home buyers. But we want it to be, but there is a $20,000 minimum, because you don't want people to just slap up a coat of paint. We really want the housing stock in the neighborhoods to be in better shape. So next slide. And one of the interesting things about this tax credit that's different than others is that the investors can't claim the tax credit until a home is completed, inspected, and occupied by an eligible owner. And there is a 5-year period after a home is sold that if the owner sells, some of the gain would have to be shared with the state, just to discourage flipping. So next slide. So again, this can only be used in neighborhoods that have median home values below the area median. The homeowners coming in to buy these homes are limited to 140% of area median. The home sales prices are limited to 4 times median income. And one of the selection criteria that the states use in allocating these credits is impact on existing residents. Because the idea is this is to help channel the flow of investment into places that otherwise aren't served by the market. So next slide. Here's some examples of how these are just rough numbers of how it would work. And one of the things I'd note is that investors can only claim the credit for the actual amount of the gap. So there's a maximum amount, which is 35% of total development costs. But if the gap is less than that, the amount of the tax credit is less than that. So we're hoping that will help ensure the efficient use of these credits. So this is an example with new construction. Next slide. This can also be used for substantial rehab, and the kind of substantial rehab that would be extremely difficult for an owner or occupant to do themselves. But again, the tax credit is just limited to the amount of the gap. And then next slide. It's slightly different with the homeownership rehab, it is a 50% credit, but only up to $100,000. So the theoretical maximum on this would be $50,000. But it would be less if the repair costs were less. So next slide. So if this were fully implemented, it would it would build 500,000 homes over 10 years. So the economic development implications of this would be really terrific for neighborhoods that otherwise wouldn't get investment. So if any of you are from New York, it would be helpful. You can go to the neighborhood. Please go to the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act website. Look at what's eligible in your city, and if you want, it would be great if you would reach out to your member of Congress. There's sample letters. There's all the information you need on the bill. Ask them to include this in the end of year package. This would be an enormous help with expanding the supply of affordable homes. So next slide. So here again, here's the website. Please take a look, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Excellent, Chris. Thanks so much for all your good work, and please stick around. We'll take the questions at the end. We're going to move straight over to Jean Slater. So Jean, as I mentioned in the beginning, is a long-term financial advisor for lots of local governments and institutional investors. He's got a deep background in the field and has done some groundwork, which we hope will end up as legislation around how to curb private equity investment using some of the tax policies and doing away with some of the benefits that they have that mean we essentially subsidize the purchase of the single family housing stock that we've all been concerned about. So Jean, welcome. Glad you're here. I'll leave it to you.
You're muted, Jean.
Sorry, thank you. We don't work for institutional purchasers. We only work for public agencies. We've represented about half the state housing finance agencies and half the country's largest cities. So let me talk about, next slide, what's been happening in terms of institutional purchases and their impact on single family, on homeownership, and their side impact on rental housing, the consequences of that, and a way of thinking about this issue that could be practically done and could help remedy what's now occurring. Next slide. So what's happened over the last few years is a technique that was sort of invented in 2010 or so of Wall Street investors raising large amounts of capital to go buy what they perceive as undervalued housing stock. Either at some point it was to flip it or to rent it. In the last few years, this has become a major trend that's increased each year of buying single family homes, particularly entry-level type homes, the kinds of homes that we normally bought by first-time buyers. So, and if you look at numbers, and this is all from the National Association of Realtors, a fairly broad definition of institutional purchases, but they bought 28% of the single family homes sold in Texas last year. 28%. And more important, maybe as important, that's a statewide figure. More important is that they're buying homes at a median price point of 26% below the state average. So they're buying entry-level homes, and therefore, if you combine those two numbers, you realize that they may be buying a third, depending on the state, a quarter or a third, half of the entry-level homes that are available in a situation in which we've seen inventories in general decline, the sales inventories, in part because people are staying in their homes longer. Now with rising interest rates. So there are lots of reasons for that. The impact is to drastically reduce the number of entry-level homes that families can buy, which inevitably forces them to compete against each other for the fewer, the smaller stock. This is part of the reason the home prices have risen fastest for lower priced homes. Next slide. And this is happening across the country. It's especially been happening in the Sun Belt, but it's been happening in virtually every state, and particularly may not happen at the statewide level as much, but in particular neighborhoods. And so what you have is out of town and out of state investors are buying up lower cost homes that local families would seek to own. Next slide. And the reason isn't that these institutional buyers, the Blackstones of the world, Invitation Homes and so forth, is not because they're paying more than families would pay, but they're buying in ways that families can't. So they're buying, with using computer programs, they're buying, with selling as is, they're buying with all cash offers. So the entire home ownership system that was created in this country between FHA and then Fannie and Freddie and VA lenders, the whole system can't compete with these kinds of offers because they don't provide this kind of sources of capital. Next slide. And the number of single-family homes being bought by investors is increasing. And some people may say, well, gee, with prices going up, institutional buyers, they're going to trim their sales, or with inflation. The reality is that if you look at the actual purchases, institutional investors have the ability to say, all right, we'll stop buying in this area for the next 2 months and cut down, as they have in about 30% of the markets they're working in, but increase purchases in other markets, or wait 2 months, because unlike a family trying to buy a home restricted to a particular metropolitan area or even part of a metropolitan area, this can make decisions anywhere in the country all at once and can simply shift their purchasing. And what's happened is inflation heats up. Major buyers see rental single-family homes to hedge against inflation. This is the way the new partnerships announced in the last few months have promoted this. Here's the quote from Bloomberg: landlords ready war chest to buy as mortgage rates sideline regular buyers. So they're promoting this is an answer to inflation. If you want to think about this from a what's really happening point of view, is lots of money got raised for real estate investment before the pandemic. And that money could not be deployed, and isn't being deployed, for office buildings or shopping centers or commercial space. So went into buying apartment buildings, and it's gone into buying single family homes for rent. Okay, next. And the consequences of this are profound. So they're forcing the families to bid for a smaller number of homes in these particular neighborhoods, driving up the percentage of disposable income that's needed, whether that's in the form of higher prices or in the form of higher mortgage payments. With mortgage rates going on, those are a seesaw, but the impact is higher, much higher percentages of disposable income. And the consequence of this is it drives rents higher because the families who would have purchased those homes remain in the rental market. And the owners of these rental homes are particularly focused on how to increase the percent of disposable income of the tenants they're charging. And the result is that as rents go up, this is not the only factor, of course, but as rents go up, the cycle drives itself. So as families desperate to escape higher rents will stretch themselves even further to buy such homes. So you have this, and what we're seeing across the country is rents and prices rising in tandem because of this relationship. And what was a problem of unaffordability of buying homes, there was at particular income groups or limited to a few major metropolitan areas where the median price of a home was so much higher than the median income. That was a problem of 5 years ago, of 5 or 6 metropolitan areas. That's now become a problem in 90% of metropolitan areas across the country. And this escalating unaffordability, when you think about home prices on average having gone up 30 to 40%, and the impact of higher mortgage rates adding another 40% in monthly payment on top of that, we're now in a fundamentally new situation across the country, where you have escalating unaffordability that threatens the financial future of everyone who doesn't own a home, and children of those who do. And when I think about this, think about the following number, that during the pandemic, home equity for households who own homes went up by $6 trillion in this country. So in San Jose, California, it went up by $250,000 on average. In Montana, $50,000 on average, so forth, all across the country. How do you make money? How does somebody who simply owned a home suddenly worth $250,000 more or $50,000 more? Where does that money come from? What that money represents is a check, an obligation that other people who don't own homes, are going to have to pay either in the form of higher monthly payments or in the form of higher rents over time. And so the question is, so that's from a broad economic point of view, and then you think about the implications for neighborhoods and for middle-class home ownership in the country. Next slide. So why does this need to be dealt with? And here are the arguments you'll hear in the New York Times by people speaking on behalf of the hedge funds and so forth. Well, haven't there always been investor-owned single-family homes? Yes. What's different today, and mom and pop landlords who own like 28 million rental single families have always been a fundamental part of the country's rental stock. What's different is the kind of and scale of financial resources and technology these major investors can do that are affecting the market. Another argument, and we had our first discussions with the White House about this, the idea I'm going to lay out here back in July. Their question was, well, aren't we simply changing homes from owner occupancy to rental? And there's certainly a need for rental homes. And why would that have an impact on affordability? Or the argument can be made by the economists who represented the hedge funds. Well, there's only 2 or 3% of all the actual units in the country are owned this way. What difference? This can't be having much of an impact. The question isn't what is the amount of the total stock of housing. The question and the impact here is what is the consequence of these purchases on the inventory of homes for sale in particular neighborhoods at a particular point in time. Creating more units as rental has very little impact because, there are 10 times as many rental units that are available for rent in any year as there are single family homes available. So you're dealing with a small inventory that's historically at some of its lowest levels ever, and you're reducing that inventory. That's where the impact is coming. It's a dynamic impact. And I think, as we said, even if prices soften with rising interest rates, the impact is the same on affordability. And it's institutional investors who are the best capitalized and incentivized to buy homes if prices soften at all, because they have access to the least expensive money. Next slide. Yeah, thanks. So there's been lots of talk about this issue. There have been hearings, 3 sets of hearings by Senate Banking, House Financial Services. We have White House statements on this. Lots of media attention. Next slide. But there have been few solutions that have been offered that are realistic in ways. the Biden administration in their May program, it was, well, FHA would wait 30 days before selling foreclosures to institutional investors. How many foreclosed homes are there that are being sold at all? This is a minor impact. Or, well, the real problem is the supply of new homes. That's certainly a problem. It's going to take many years to have any impact over it. Or we can provide more down payment assistance, and we've been doing that. We helped design the California Dream for All program that's going to provide ultimately $1 billion a year for the next 10 years for large shared appreciation loans. But those have to be limited because it adds fuel, as previous speakers speak, it adds fuel to the fire. It pushes up home prices. What we're trying to do is deal with the inventory. Next slide. So is there a practical solution that can potentially attract support in Congress? Get through. So we've tried to design this approach in a couple of ways, that it not increase taxes or government subsidies, that it not try to limit who can buy the properties and saying, oh, we're going to rule out certain kinds of buyers, which will create all sorts of legal problems. It doesn't create any controls on owners. It doesn't require a government bureaucracy. It doesn't impact any of the millions of small mom and pop landlords. It uses private market incentives. And in casting this in discussions with National Association of Local Housing Finance Agencies, because the hedge funds will say, well, you're limiting the free market by anything you're doing. The answer is this, we're calling this the Free Market for Home Ownership Act, because it'll strengthen the free market for families to buy homes rather than limiting it, which is what's now happening. Next. So here's the idea. And it's a very simple one, and I'll contrast it with some of the other approaches that have been introduced in Congress in the last few months, sort of more out of symbolic statements and frustration, which is we should put in effect, 100% tax on large investors. Well, if you do that, obviously you're going to have constitutional problems, because that's the same as eminent domain. Basically, you're taking property without paying for it. So in any courts, and certainly with this Supreme Court, you'd never be able to do this. So the question is, what can be done that'll have an impact that's simple, that's constitutional, that'll meet all the criteria that I was just laying out? So the approach was to start with a first recognition that American taxpayers are supporting these institutional purchases. And if we stop supporting them, they will be reduced dramatically. This isn't usually talked about. It's sort of taken for granted, how people finance stuff. So think about, if you're an individual home buyer and you buy a home, you get a deduction. You can have an interest deduction on up to $750,000 in mortgage debt. Why don't we set a similar cap on institutional investors? Say at 100 times that, say at $75 million of debt. Or more simply, you can think of it as for any investor, and I'll describe what I mean by investor here, but any investor owns more than 100 single family homes wouldn't be able to deduct the interest on the debt. So from one of the questions asked is, well, gee, couldn't any of these Wall Street entities simply create 1,000 partnerships, and they'd all fall within your little buckets, right? Whatever size bucket you make. The answer is no, and there's longstanding precedent in the tax law. The cap would be imposed on any investor, investment entity, or related party at the part who is a general partner. Almost all of these are done by general partnerships with lots of limited partners. So the general partner, any related party to that general partner, so Blackstone sets up 80 partnerships. All those 80 partnerships, the total number of homes or interest owned by all those partnerships, however they dole it out in their K1s, is a single number. So would not affect, it only affects people who would own more than 100 or more single family homes, not any small pop landlord. So the idea is we would reduce the incentive for buying these homes. So the reason each of these funds has a different mix of debt and equity, but the way they boost returns to the private equity investors is they go out and borrow money from, actually, for the first of these home purchases, they borrow it from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, but they'll borrow from all the major banks. Why? Because if they borrow half the money at 5 or 6%, and the rest of the money, they double the return to the equity investor. They leverage their debt, just like any, multifamily buyer or anybody else. So this would reduce that incentive. So Invitation Homes, for example, had $280 million of net income. In 2021, they were passing through to their individual partners, and they had $90 million of interest deductions. So we remove those interest deductions, we're removing, what they can, we're reducing the after-tax income to investors. From looking at various funds, we look at this as probably reducing, instead of a 12% return, people would be looking at an 8% return. A very significant difference when you're choosing what to invest in. You could even go further by, we haven't proposed this, but some people are talking about this. You could eliminate the depreciation deduction, on the purchase price of the homes. All right, so we're disincentivizing buying more of these homes. Okay. But the second piece of this is just as important and is sort of the double whammy that makes this powerful. This isn't a tax increase. This isn't intended to raise money for the government. We would allow precisely these same investors, to the extent you're losing any interest deduction on all these homes you've bought, you regain it as a credit against the capital gains if you sell the homes to a first-time buyer, in the next 4 years. So it says, it's a message that says taxpayers are not going to subsidize you buying more of them, but will allow you to make the same amount of money as a credit if you sell the homes to first-time buyers. Next slide. So it's not intended as a tax increase, but to shift what the tax incentives are. So instead of tax incentives, leading to fewer homes being available to families, it uses those same tax incentives to make more homes available to first-time buyers. It makes other leveraged investments that don't reduce home ownership relatively more attractive than going out and buying another 10,000 single-family homes. It removes the government subsidy that exacerbates this problem. It increases the inventory of homes family can buy without increasing taxes or establishing any new programs, just using the normal mechanisms of the tax code. It says, let's stop subsidizing this. And I think one dimension I haven't really talked about here, but I think is very important, is to recognize the impacts of this on neighborhoods. The areas which have been especially affected, probably more than any others, is the NAR's analysis, are the minority neighborhoods. I sat on a panel with the woman who's in charge of housing for Atlanta, who described the impact on Black neighborhoods of Atlanta, where precisely the homes that Black homebuyers would be trying to buy, and the city has been trying with various racial equity programs to address. These are precisely the homes that are being bought by these investors. There's an outsized impact. I don't mean this is some deliberate effort, but it's the natural consequence of they're buying the less expensive homes. Next slide. I don't remember what the next slide is. Next slide. Okay, so it's carefully designed not to affect smaller investors. It doesn't affect iBuyers who are simply flipping homes and reselling them. It doesn't affect, we would carve out banks who hold loans upon foreclosure. It excludes, this is long discussions we had with the White House about this, it excludes debt for new homes being built or acquired by major investors, since these are adding to the housing supply. And maybe they would have been built and owned by homeowners, but at least they're adding to the supply as opposed to reducing the supply. And we would carve out an exclusion for homes that are being substantially rehabilitated. This is one of the arguments that hedge funds make. Well, it's very hard for first-time buyers to do extensive repairs. So what we propose is if you're spending at least 15% of the acquisition cost on hard construction costs to third parties, not yourself as the Wall Street investment entity, those would be carved out as well. So we're trying to make this as precise and narrow and powerful as possible. Next slide. This is just the details of the tax code revision. Let me go to the next slide here, and then I'll wrap up. So just to talk about what we meant by being able to recover the loss deduction. So this is the draft language, and then I'll talk about the politics of this for a minute. So it would be for the sale, you'd get this, credit if you had bought the home before this law went into effect, which if this could be part of the year-end Extenders Act, would be December 31st. You're selling either the current tenant or a first-time buyer on a fee simple basis at a price no greater than 95% of the mortgage lender's appraised value, and you're financed in a normal way with a first mortgage from a state or local housing finance agency or insured or guaranteed by FHA, VA, RD, Fannie or Freddie. Anyway, so that's the proposal. Let me just talk for a minute about where this came from and where we're trying to go with this. So this originally arose as we were designing this California Dream for All program by legislative leaders in California saying, well, is there anything we can do in designing this program that would limit these investor purchases? And the answer is you can't do it in a loan program. That and my conversations with people in Atlanta led to thinking about this is a national problem. Can we address it in a simple, clear, national way? We then had conversations with various housing officials and housing economists, all except the one who had worked for the hedge funds before, all thought this was, eminently doable and desirable. We then talked to Senator Sherrod Brown's office, who's been very interested in this, is working on draft legislation. It wouldn't hurt probably to, have, pushing people to indicate how important this is. Barry Zegas from the National Consumer Federation of America and I wrote an article in Housing Wire in September about this to lay out this idea to get public attention. I've been talking to various senators or staff for various senators and people on Ways and Means about this concept, and Brown hopefully sponsoring this. So I think this needs a push. And the obvious vehicle is since this has to be a tax extenders as part of the lame duck session, because there is the end of every Congress. This would be a natural to try to do that. One question, just to indicate this as well, is there any possibility of getting GOP support? We work for a lot of, red states as well as blue states around the country. And one of the heads of one of our state agencies, when I asked this, I said, is this a problem in your state? And he said, absolutely, this is a tremendous problem in each of our metropolitan areas. And I said, was there any way, you can imagine any GOP members supporting this? And the response was, well, maybe if it's pitched right. And I said, well, pitched how? And he said, pitched it as this is New York investors coming in, stealing the homes from local families. So you can see some of the description of this. The isn't, but it's part of it, up to the election. It's what he indicated was GO members you know, it fits a democratic narrative that corporate greed is responsible for inflation, as opposed to a Republican narrative that Biden's responsible for inflation, both of which are, when you look at inflation everywhere around the world post-pandemic, you know, irrelevant. You have both these things. This is not about blaming anybody or assigning blame. This is simply about what should American taxpayers be supporting with their money, and should they be supporting homeownership or should they be detracting from it? So that's where we are. I think timing is crucial, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thanks so much, Jean. Very helpful. And so let's have questions both for Chris and Jean. Ellie, have we got things lined up?
We do have some questions. So I'm going to start with some questions that came in for Chris. So one person wanted to know if you had any information about why lenders have pulled out of the FHA 203K lending program.
That's a long-standing issue. There are a bunch of changes made to 203K in response to some abuses in the New York market in the late 90s. So there are very strict rules about if you get a 203K loan, your contractor has to be approved by HUD. And there are very specific rules about the kind of draws. So it's, you know, theoretically possible. It seems like a really one of the things I'm sure Julia Gordon is thinking about at FHA is how to make a more homeowner-friendly rehab loan product, because it is, you know, it's a challenge to work with a contractor and buy a dilapidated house, and it's the houses that need the work that's the housing stock that's available for first-time homebuyers. So, you know, I think all the things Jean said to do, plus the things I was talking about, this all needs to be put together as a push to expand the affordable homeownership supply. It's all of the above.
So Chris, let me give you this opportunity to let us know. And Jean, you be thinking about this as well. We have people from housing counseling agencies all around the country. And Chris, you mentioned folks in New York reaching out to their representatives. Is there a specific representative? Like, is Senator Schumer like the best person to reach out to in New York State?
Yes, well, I mean, our thinking is what's going to happen with this end of the year budget deal is it ends up being a very small group of members who work on it. The Senate, the majority and minority leaders in the Senate, the Speaker of the House, the minority leader in the House. It's going to be a small universe. The Neighborhood Homes Investment Act would be terrific for New York State. There are large areas in upstate New York that are eligible. And so it would be great if New York groups would reach out to Senator Schumer's office and ask that S98 be included in the final budget.
Okay.
And all the information people need is on the Neighborhood Homes website.
Great. For all the contact information you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so one of our attendees said that they believe the low mod census tract is a mistake. The low income housing tax credit's not restricted in that way.
That's true.
That we should consider the opportunity and places of opportunity to create home ownership. And so this person is wondering if there's any potential to move the eligible areas.
You know, that is a great question. And we wrestled with this a lot, but the reason we ended up targeting it to census tracts is looking at what's happened in the housing market in Washington, D.C., when neighborhoods that were completely affordable 20 years ago are now full of $1 million houses. And what we don't want to do is pour gasoline on all housing markets. It's a targeted solution to the problem of houses that don't appraise, the valuation gap that prevents mortgage lending. So we're not trying to solve. It's also a great thing to do home ownership in opportunity areas, and subsidies like the Capital Magnet Fund and the Home Program absolutely ought to be available for that. this is kind of like how Gene was talking about. What Gene's talking about is a kind of a tax rifle shot to try to just address the problem. That's what we were trying to do with this as well. And that's why there's the census tract targeting. And it's more similar to the new markets tax credit, which similarly has census tract eligibility. That was the thinking.
Okay. Could this be applied to putting a modular home on land?
Yep. And that's why we're working with Next Step and Stacey Epperson's group that does terrific work with manufactured housing, because that could be a really good way to increase the stock of lower priced homes.
Okay. The next set of questions I think are directed to Gene. So since the market's changed dramatically with higher interest rates and prices have settled a bit, although they're still high, over the most recent 3 months, have private equity firms or investors gone away in large numbers in the current market, allowing first-time homebuyer new opportunities?
No, is the simple answer. So of like 120 metropolitan areas that these investors were targeting, they've sort of stopped purchasing in about 30 of them, but have increased purchases in others. There was just an announcement, I think last week, with JP Morgan putting up $1 billion into a new fund that's for newly built such homes, rental single family homes. But you've seen, as I said, there's an ability to pause and say, okay, maybe prices are getting a little overvalued in Phoenix. We can wait 2 months and see where the market goes. And then, when the algorithms indicate this is a better price point, they can buy more. So the answer is no, it hasn't overall. I mean, there's been a softening of prices, but a softening of prices is an opportunity if you have access to unlimited capital. So I think the answer is this problem is not going to be less a year from now than it is today, which is, I think, the real question.
Okay. Okay, so this person has a couple of thoughts about other ideas. So how about a way to control the inventory in municipalities that will only allow the sale of the home if it meets certain first-time buyer qualification, in which the municipality determines their criteria for the sale. Therefore, the specific homes targeted for this program will stay within the market for first-time home buyers only and no investors. Or how about some kind of land trust where the entity owns the land specifically, and then the homeowner can purchase the home, which dramatically lowers the cost of the home and monthly mortgage payment, as borrower just pays on the mortgage on the home, and the property taxes are paid by the entity owning the real estate land, and the entity would be responsible for paying real estate taxes. So
I think
if either of you want to opine on that.
Well, let me shift the question away from me to where I think it belongs, which is certainly with this Neighborhood Homes Act, you could certainly impose or deal with things that affect who the homes are sold to. In what we're describing, anything which basically takes the entire market and says, we're going to prevent people from buying homes because of who they are, there's just no legal basis or constitutional basis for doing that. I think people are going to find out that effectively this would be viewed as a taking of property. So I think on the tax side, on this idea of the institutional investors, I don't think it's something one can simply prohibit or impose. Like one of the congressional bills is pay $20,000. You have to start paying $20,000 a year as a new tax to the federal government, an excise tax, like a liquor tax, if you own more than 100 single family homes. And you add that up and you say, what's the present value of that if you continue to own homes? Well, it's about $350,000. And that's just about the median price of a single family home in this country. So in effect, it's 100% tax. So I think anything which is trying to prohibit activity as opposed to disincentivizing it will have fundamental problems.
But I mean, I think that the problem, though, is complex enough that an all of the above solution is.
Oh, yeah. I just meant,
the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act is targeted only to owner occupants. So, and you can legally do that with the tax credit. The way the tax credit is structured, investors can only claim the tax credit if the home is sold to an owner occupant. So you can't use neighborhood homes for buying up single family homes to rent them out. I think that's helpful. I also think, we've got to look at this inventory of foreclosed homes held by Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, anything we can do to get those homes in the hands of owner occupants. That's really helpful too. And I think getting in the market and competing with investors to buy the homes is also helpful. So, and it would also be, it would be great if Congress fired up and included Gene's tax provision and the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act in the budget package. I'm not holding my breath, but it is certainly worthwhile.
Okay,
Jump in with one tax-related question, aimed at James, or either of you feel like it. So in the House legislation, the Stop Wall Street Landlords Act, they also talk about, they talk about the interest deduction, but they also talk about depreciation and taking that away on properties in the same way, and then obviously you could restore it if it was becoming an owner occupant. But is that a valuable add-on, or is that problematic?
It's only a political issue, I think, as to how much one can get away with. There may be advantages in proposing adding depreciation. I wouldn't eliminate depreciation deduction on the money spent on rehabilitating a home, because that's, of use in improving the stock. But you could limit the depreciation deduction. I mean, we were trying to come up with a narrow, broadly supportable one that would not be as extreme. But I think, frankly, in this political environment, proposing something that goes further and either getting it or settling for something less, I think is good. It would have roughly double the impact of what it, or even more, of what we're proposing about limiting the interest deduction. I need to jump to another call. I see the question about, can we do a categorical exclusion? Let me think about that one. But I think from our discussions with Senate banking staff, we've talked to the Joint Committee on Taxation. I think we have ways to prevent the clever tax attorneys and accountants simply dividing up into more partnerships. But I'll think.
Well,
more
and
about
before you jump, Gene, are there any representatives that housing counseling agencies should really make sure they reach out to about this proposal?
Gwen Moore in Milwaukee, on the House side, obviously Chairman Dean on Ways and Means, particularly Sherrod Brown in Senate Banking. I would also reach out to, on the Senate side, to Senator Wyden on Senate Finance, and to, Senator Merkley of Oregon is also, we've had discussions with them about their, wanting to do something about this. So those are, I think, key, obviously Schumer, but those are key people I would, think of.
Yeah, the chairman
Sooner rather than later, correct?
Yes.
Sooner
Okay.
rather than later. And the chairman of House Ways and Means is Richard Neal of Massachusetts.
Yes, exactly.
So that, and.
Oh, did I say Dean? I'm sorry, my
You said
mind.
you meant Neil. I knew what you meant.
Thank you. 4-letter word.
And Sherrod Brown is a champ with all of this stuff. He's on chair of Senate Banking, and he's on the Finance Committee, and he is a mover and shaker on both the Neighborhood Homes Investment
Right,
Act
and he's who
and
we've
on
been-
Gene's.
We've been doing 90% of our work with Brown's office. So there's the place to focus. How can we support this?
Yeah, that's a terrific staff.
Okay, I got to jump. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Okay.
Gene.
Bye.
And so Gene answered one of the questions that was in there about the tax deduction. And there's a little bit of a conversation about land trust. One person mentioned that land bank isn't necessarily the best for first-time buyers because the homes are in disrepair. But in my experience with land banks, I will say it depends on the program, because there are land bank programs that actually do the rehab and then sell them rehabbed and ready to go to low income home buyers. So you might want to research your land bank and make sure what kind of program they have. And then somebody mentioned that not all land trusts pay for the taxes on the land. They put that cost on the homeowner, but it does open the door for opportunity for first-time home buyers if the land trust is structured to reach those at lower AMIs of their area. And I think there was one question that came in the chat. It's really hard to keep track of questions in the chat. Oh, why is FHA, FMAE holding on to foreclosures?
They're working, we're working on that. Because yes, all those, with the expiration of the foreclosure moratorium, there are more homes going into the foreclosure pipeline, and a lot of those homes would be good stock for first-time buyers. That's why NCST is working with the GSEs. Like Freddie Mac sells some of their foreclosures through us so that we make them available to community-based nonprofits. We'd like to see Fannie Mae do that as well. And FHA is working on having a broader universe of nonprofit buyers able to buy FHA foreclosures too. And there's two ways those go in, through either claims without conveyance of title or actually going through the process and becoming REO, but servicers prefer to do it through CWCOT. And so that's why that's the process we're trying to influence.
Great. So Jean is not on anymore. So I don't know, Christy or Bruce, if you're able to answer the question about what people should refer to this tax proposal as when they're speaking with a representative.
That's actually a great question. I don't know the name of Jean's proposal, but I would say be in touch with Sherrod Brown's office.
Yeah, I mean, I think just say it's the private equity bill, but Jean wants it to be called the Free Market for Home Ownership Act. But we haven't actually heard from Brown's people that that's what they wanted to call it.
And Emily Thaden just put that into the chat. Free Market for Home Ownership Act is what he said. So
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all of our questions. Back to you, Bruce.
Thank you, Chris, for all your good work. And this was terrific. Great conversation. We'll have you back on a whole range of other issues as well.
Okay.
It's a very nice interaction between you and Jean, as well as the questions. So thanks.
Great questions. Thank you all very much.
Great.
And reach out to me if you have any questions about neighborhood homes. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Excellent. Well, we'll keep working on it too. All right. So, and big news for us. I hope it's news for you. You can join now by using a credit card. You do have to go in. We're part of this foundation called Tides Foundation, of Tides Center, and it's processed through them. They actually do all our accounting and everything. And what you do is you go and you have to scroll through all the Tides projects, but we're under N, National Housing Resource Center, and you can find us and pay by credit card. And thank you to the couple, it's just happened, just this last week or so. And thank you for the couple groups that have already tested it out. Seems to work. And we got notice that it came through. So thanks and big shout out to you. We really appreciate that. We're very interested in expanding the work we do and the impact. And we are a major part of our budget is the membership dues. And we would really love you to be a member if you're not a member already. And certainly if you are a member, a few of you haven't gotten around to renewing yet. I know it's on your agenda, so just make it happen in 2022 still. And we'll make goal by the end of the month. And there's discounts on the credit reports and the student loans, but really we support your work and love your work, but this will help us expand and continue the work that we're doing as well. And be sure to use the jobs board. It's interesting to me that Eric is looking for jobs out there and calling up HUD agencies we know, and saying, hey, we've got this free jobs board. And he's actually popping the job onto the board, but you should be doing this and get it to be just a part of the routine if you're hiring. Thanks for all the good work everybody's doing out in the field, and we will we'll talk to you next week. And just a reminder, and if you missed the very beginning, this is going to be a deep dive into an AmeriCorps program that will provide people who can work in your housing counseling program. You will need to pay them a subsidy, the AmeriCorps subsidy, but it's much cheaper than a full staff person. These are people that will come in with some motivation, and they will also receive the Housing Action Illinois training with the idea that they could become certified and as a housing counselor by the end of the year. So this is like a double win, and we'll have the team of Housing Action Illinois people on the call next week. And I think you'll find it very valuable. So thanks, everybody. And if you've got more thoughts about the credit report stuff we talked at the beginning, please shoot us an email. We're going to try to figure out if there's something useful we can do on this. Thanks. Bye.